In this video, we're going to study the verb to be. This is not going to be a basic lesson, but a fairly advanced lesson. In other words, this video is not for people who are learning English. It is for advanced students or for people who are training to be teachers. On this scale, I would grade the difficulty about here. So be prepared for some grammatical terminology. Let's make a start. Here are the different forms of the verb to be. There are 8 of them. Be is the base form. This is the version that you will find in the dictionary. The next 3, am, is and are the present tense forms. Was and were are the past tense forms. And being and been are the participle forms. Being is the present participle and been is the past participle. We will talk about the participle forms later. For now, let's see where these other forms fit in the various tenses. Let's start with the present tense. You should be familiar with this. Am is used with I, is used with he, she and it, and are is used for the rest. Now, I've shown you this because you might have expected me to write plural instead of the rest, but look at this. This is the singular version of you, and it always takes are. It is something of an oddity that the singular version is the same as the plural version. So just keep that in mind. Next, the past tense. Again, this is just revision. Was is used for singular and were is used for plural, except for that oddity with the singular version of you. Bear that in mind. And now the future tense. So that is the whole tense chart, but don't forget there are contracted versions in the present tense and the future tense. Let's keep going. I want you to look at these top 3. The top 3 are the singular rows. The bottom 3 are the plural rows. The very top row equates to the first person, so this is called first person singular. The next row is called second person singular. And the next row is called third person singular. This is called grammatical person. Let's do a little bit more on this. So here we have 3 people. And the speaker says, I am talking to you about her. The speaker is the first person. It equates to the pronoun I. The person being spoken to is the second person. It equates to the pronoun you. And the person being spoken about is the third person. And here it equates to the pronoun her. So, first person, second person, and third person. The speaker, the person spoken to, and the person spoken about. That's how grammatical person works. Let's go back. Now let's look at the plural ones. First person, second person, third person. Look at this. Well, it's no different. We are talking to you about them, a group that includes the speaker. That is the first person. The people spoken to, second person, the people spoken about, third person. It doesn't matter whether it's singular or plural. It's the same concept. So why did we need to cover that? Well, if you're learning a language from a book or in a classroom, then you will come across these terms. So you may see a term like the verb to be in the present tense third person singular, which you now know equates to is. Or you might come across something that says the past tense first person plural of the verb to be. You now know this equates to were. So this is some terminology you need to be very familiar with, especially if you're planning to teach or to take your learning to the next level. Let's clear most of that. I want to put our main headings back up. Before we continue, I just want to tell you that the verb to be is the most common verb in English. And the reason why it's the most common verb is because it can be used as a main verb or an auxiliary verb. And it is very common in both of those uses. And that's what we're going to concentrate on next. So, as a main verb, to be has a meaning like to exist, to occur, or to happen. As an auxiliary verb, it helps with tense. Let me explain this idea of main verb and auxiliary verb with some examples. John was there. Well, our verb to be here is was. This is the main verb in the sentence, and it has a meaning a bit like existed. The meetings were in London. Here is our verb to be. It is the main verb in the sentence, and it has a meaning a bit like happened. Now let's look at the verb to be as an auxiliary verb. John was working outside. Here is our verb to be, but this time it is not the main verb. It is just helping with the tense of the main verb. The main verb is working. The main verb is the verb which gives you the meaning. We were painting the fence. Were is our verb to be. Painting is the main verb, the verb that gives us the meaning. Okay, this is what we mean by main verb and auxiliary verb. The verb to be as an auxiliary verb helps with tense. Okay, what we're going to do now is go through each of these, giving the main uses of each one. So let's start with the base form. There are three main uses of be as a main verb. Number one, be is used after will to form the future tense. For example, Alan will be rich. Remember, be here is a main verb, the one that gives us the meaning. 2. Be is used to give an order. For example, be quiet. And 3. Be is used after a modal verb. You might be correct. In this sentence, might is the modal verb. And modal verbs are always followed by a base form. Let's quickly look at modal verbs. Here are the most common modal verbs. Can, could, may, might, shall, would, should, will, and must. So modal verbs express properties such as possibility, ability, permission, and obligation. Hopefully this is just revision for you, but I just want to make this point. These traits are known as modality, and that's where the term modal verb comes from. Here are some simple examples, and you can just pause this video and have a look at those if you don't yet fully understand the traits that make up modality. Okay, let's get back to business. Let's now look at be as an auxiliary verb. Be is used after a modal verb. It looks like we've just covered that point, but look at the example. I might be leaving. Here, be is not a main verb. The main verb is leaving. Leaving is the one that gives us the meaning. Of course, we have to use be because it's following a modal verb. But this time, be is an auxiliary verb. Compare it to this. I am leaving. So looking at this example, it's very obvious that am is an auxiliary verb. Well, it's the same in the main example. I might be leaving. We can't use am because we've used a modal verb. Hopefully you can see why be is an auxiliary verb in this example, but a main verb in the example before. Remember, the main verb is the one that gives you the meaning. Okay, let's keep going. Next, let's look at the present tense forms. Number 1. One of the present tense forms can be used to link a subject to a description. For example, I am happy. Am is our verb to be in the present tense, and it is being used to link the word I to a description. Here is another example. John is a vampire. Is the verb to be in the present tense, and it is being used to link John to a description. Now's a good time to tell you that when the verb to be is used like this, it is classified as a linking verb. So keep an eye out for that term. And when it links a subject to an adjective, like happy, that adjective is known as a predicate adjective. And when it links to a noun or a noun phrase, like in this example, then that noun is known as a predicate nominative. And if they are new terms for you, then we have a whole lesson on predicate adjectives and a lesson on predicate nominatives. Also, keep an eye out for this construction. It is cold. And this one. There are two reasons. These constructions using it and there are common ways of stating facts. Now let's look at the present tense forms as auxiliary verbs. The present tense forms are used for tense, specifically the present progressive tense. Let's look at some examples. I am painting the fence. Am is our verb to be used as an auxiliary verb. Anne is eating a pizza. Is our verb to be used as an auxiliary verb. They are shouting for help. Are is our verb to be used as an auxiliary verb. Don't forget that in any sentence, the verb that gives us the meaning is the main verb. Do not confuse main verbs with finite verbs. Sometimes they are the same, sometimes they are not the same. Everything in yellow here is a finite verb. In the left-hand column, the finite verbs are the main verbs. And in the right-hand column, the finite verbs are not the main verbs. A finite verb is one that tells us the tense. The main verb is the one that tells us the meaning. Okay, let's keep going. Next, let's look at the past tense forms. As a main verb, a past tense form is used to link a subject to a description. Well, it's just the same as what we've done, apart from it's in the past tense. I was happy. Was is our verb to be in the past tense, and it links the word I to the description happy. John and Anne were vampires. Were is our verb to be in the past tense, and it links John and Anne to the description. As before, if it's an adjective, it's a predicate adjective. And if it's a noun, it's a predicate nominative. Remember, the words in yellow here, the main verbs are also linking verbs. So the verb to be is a linking verb. In fact, it is the most common linking verb. And don't forget those constructions to state facts. It was cold. There were two reasons. Everything you're looking at here in yellow is a linking verb. Let's clear some of this. Now let's look at the past tense forms as auxiliary verbs. Well, it's no different. They are used for tense, only this time the past progressive tense. I was painting the fence. Anne was eating a pizza. They were shouting for help. These are all the verb to be used as auxiliary verbs. Don't forget, the main verbs give us the meaning. Everything you are looking at here in yellow now is a finite verb. A finite verb is the one that tells us the tense. When you look at a finite verb, you can tell what tense the sentence is in. Let's clear that. Let's move to the participle forms, starting with the present participle. As a main verb, being is used with a meaning like existing in the state of. Let's put up an example. Sarah is being annoying. Here's the word being. It is the main verb. It's the one that gives us the meaning. You were being ridiculous. As before, this is the main verb. So what are these? These are also the verb to be, but this time they are auxiliary verbs. Remember, we're talking about being as a main verb. And in each one, it is being supported by the verb to be as an auxiliary verb. So you can see it can get quite complicated. In the same sentence, you can have the verb to be as an auxiliary verb and as a main verb. And that's what we have in these two. So these are auxiliary verbs. And because they tell us the tense, they're also finite verbs. Let's keep slamming this message home. Now let's look at being as an auxiliary verb. Being can be used to form a passive sentence. Let's do an example. Tom is being promoted soon. Well, here, being is an auxiliary verb and it's helping to form a passive sentence. This is our main verb, promoted. In a passive sentence, the action of the main verb is done to the subject. We have a whole lesson on passive sentences. Before we look at another example, look at this. We have is being used as an auxiliary verb. In this sentence, it is the finite verb. It's the one that tells us the tense. Let's put up another example of a passive sentence. The cows were being milked. Being is an auxiliary verb. The main verb is milked. Remember, the action of the verb is done to the subject. Were, which is also the verb to be, is being used as an auxiliary verb as well. In this sentence, it is the finite verb, the one that tells us the tense. Okay, nearly there. Let's keep going. Let's look at the past participle, being. As a main verb, being is used with a meaning like existed in the state of. So quite similar. Sarah has been happy. Been is our main verb, the one that gives us the meaning. You have been helpful. Again, been is the main verb. Has and have are the auxiliary verbs. Notice that the auxiliary verb with being is a form of the verb to be, but the auxiliary verb with been, the past participle, is a form of the verb to have. These auxiliary verbs are also the finite verbs in these sentences, the ones that tell us the tense. Here is the main use of being as an auxiliary verb. It's used to form a passive sentence, so quite similar. Tom has been promoted. Here's our been as an auxiliary verb, here is our main verb, and the action of that main verb is being done to the subject. That's why it's a passive sentence. Here is another example. The cows have been milked. Been is our auxiliary verb helping to form a passive sentence. The main verb is milked. The action of that verb is being done to the subject. In the top example, has is our finite verb, and in the bottom example, have is our finite verb. The ones that tell us the tense. Okay, let's clear all of that. Wow, that was quite some stomp through the verb to be. I hope you followed everything. I did say that this was not a basic lesson. In fact, now we've gone through it, I'm going to change the level of this lesson. I'm going to move it up a bit. I think this was more of an advanced lesson than an intermediate lesson. So if you followed everything, well done. I would just say one more thing. If you're learning a language or if you're planning on teaching a language, you must get very good at the verb to be, the verb to have, and the verb to do. That's everything. Thanks for watching. Good luck.